Alright guys, so today we're going to go into the Bak Siu Lum system. We're going to take a look at a few different techniques, and we're going to have a little bit of a conversational piece talking about the system and some of its theory. And we'll start with that this time. But it's a defensive system. It is a very consistent system. So it's not one of those systems that you'll see that have forms that are so abstract and variant. So from Shaolin 1 to Shaolin 10, there's 10 key forms. They're all consist of the same key movements. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of variance in terms of doing the same thing in a different way. And overall, it's not a power-heavy system. It's definitely more of a soft style when compared to Southern Kung Fu. And that's not to say that doesn't have power, that it doesn't have intense training, that it doesn't build strength, and it doesn't need strength. But what it is saying is that it's not very taxing in like muscular development, things like that. You won't feel it as much as you would a style like Hung Gar. You will definitely feel your heart racing, more cardiovascular stuff. So it's definitely going to build stamina a lot better than a style like Hung Gar, in my personal opinion. Our first technique, which is going to be the front and back sweep. So you'll see in the video that I don't shoot straight. I tend to cut off to an angle with my sweeps, and that is intentional. The reason you do that is because you're moving out of the way of something, or you're trying to cut an angle. That can be done a lot of different ways. So for the front sweep, the first example that I have is basically, someone throws, you block, you establish contact with their body, and you sweep them over your leg. So you're not going to get into that low stance. Versus how I showed the back sweep, where you cover and then sweep around. So in that instance, where you get into that low stance, odds are you're evading a kick or something. I don't really see a reason to go that low when your opponent is clearly on solid ground. Both feet are on the ground. There's little likelihood of that technique working, because they're stable. When I'm doing that back sweep, I am envisioning like a roundhouse kick being thrown, and I'm going under it to sweep. Now, the reason you cut an angle is to get closer to your target without being at a greater risk of getting clocked, and for the sake of movement, you don't want to be in one place for a long time. And I do think that this is a really good technique. I don't see too many people use it. I've seen variations of it in Korean and Japanese style of martial arts. And I do think that it's a viable technique that more people could try to use. It is risky though, especially in the age of like jiu-jitsu and stuff, because you're so low to the ground. You're closer to their comfort zone. So I would recommend you experiment with it and try it out. So you see this first one. Now this next set is actually a drill: punch, kick, punch, punch, punch. And then the second one is just block down, punch, kick, punch, punch. And it's kind of the same. You have to remember that Shaolin is a defensive system, and Shaolin is a very, I would say, poetic system. So a lot of it is very flashy, and it doesn't look like you would use it. And there's a lot of reasons given for that. One of the reasons was that, back in the day, people would look at them while they're training, so they had to disguise their techniques. And another argument is just that doing it the way that it's supposed to be utilized doesn't give you the same type of exercise. And I agree with that one. Doing those stances, being an up and down, stretching and delivering in a different way, in an awkward way, compared to how you would use it in a real situation, does build a certain type of strength. However, I don't believe that you have to do it in such a way that it teaches like maladaptive concepts. So for example, when I am doing this block here, right, I'm not just going into the stance, right? I'm moving one way and then moving the other way, because I don't want to deal with that incoming force. So when the strike is coming, I'm just blocking it and moving my body out of the way. And I'm practicing this concept while practicing the form. When I punch, I don't just sit straight, right? I turn my body to generate more power. When I kick, same deal. I have to turn my body so that my foot and my hand can reach my target. So when I land, wow, I do the same thing in that I'm coordinating with my body. So here is that breakdown of how I use that technique. So we start off in a fighting position. Traditionally, at least as per what I was taught, the Shaolin, Northern Shaolin fighting pose was like this in a front stance. I personally don't like it, but I like the concept. So you'll hear karate guys say that whoever controls the distance controls the fight. And I agree with that to an extent. And I think that's what this concept is that you're creating distance, right? You don't want your opponent to be so close to you, so you keep your arms out to keep them at a distance. However, as you can clearly see, like all this is wide open. It doesn't feel like I have a strong structure. So I think you can apply those same concepts while staying protected. The first thing we do is that block. Now that lotus position is used similarly to a crossing stance, where it's a low kick to the knee. Then that grab punch is a little bit awkward. So you'll see I kind of just double back, right? Let's say I commit to that kick, it doesn't work, I step back and I cover. Then I'm going, like whatever hand is establishing contact, I'm going to do my best to connect with it, right? So it's here, and then I will do my best to connect to that arm, to grab that arm, pull in, and strike. However, if that's not possible, I can still just go straight here. So I don't want to commit to a grab like this because it's so far reaching and it doesn't give me any type of support. And as you can see, this is prime kicking region and this is prime overhand region when my arm is extended like this, because it's going to take a lot more time to do this versus if I'm here and come down. So that punch, kick punch, punch punch is pretty straightforward. I think the kick punch is a interesting technique because I don't ever see anybody use it, but it's weird, and I don't think it's gonna be like a strong like knockdown, put down somebody, but it's 2 points of contact coming at the same time, and it's hard to decide what to do. And you could argue, I'm going to sidestep, I'm going to just worry about the kick because arguably the kick has more reach, but it is such an awkward movement that whenever somebody would try it on me in sparring, I would always get hit because it's like, it's not common. I really feel like that's why. And maybe it's not a great technique and maybe it's just not common, so it throws people off. But again, I implore you guys to try it and let me know what you think. All right. So next technique we're going to do is, and we actually covered a similar technique in was the Gungji video from the Hungar section that we had, and it's the same technique performed a different way. The only difference is there is a degree of variability, and it gives you a little bit different options when you do it this way in Northern Shaolin. So we do like an axe kick, right? Our hands cut across, and our foot swings up. The only difference is you can choose to scoop your opponent's leg, or you can choose to use that as a straight up sweep. And that sweep would be the same way that I explained that front sweep that you do like consecutively, that we did in the beginning of this video. Then the other option is to use that movement to, redirect somebody's incoming hand, pick up their leg, and then throw that side kick. Now, why do they do that sweep and then the side kick immediately, assuming it is a sweep? I think it's more about training. Training your core, training your flexibility and your balance. And if we're looking at it as a martial technique, then I can see it as if I sweep somebody or I'm trying to sweep somebody and they evade it, they move out the way, or they just don't go down, I can use that kick to either push off of them or to reach further to them if they're retreating. And I don't have to recenter, right? I don't have to go here and then come back up and do something else. So I'll sweep, I'll kick, and then I can come back. Then the other thing is, if I do successfully sweep and they fall down, I can kick right there. This technique is going to be super hard to record how that would look, and here's how I did it. And I know that it looks really weird, but what this movement is just a takedown. You know, you're or maybe a throw. My terminology is all over the place, but you're closing the gap between you and your opponent. You're grabbing them and doing kind of like a hip toss, I guess. You know, maybe that would be the best way to look at it or to verbalize it. And there is a way to explain this circle here, and that is a self-defense specific move because nobody's just going to grab you like this in the ring, right? So somebody grabs, you clear. And a good way to look at how to handle grabs is to look at the position of your opponent's thumb, right? So if they're grabbing me this way, like a cross grab, and their thumb is here, I'm going to go against or onto their thumb to clear their hand off of me. I'm going to grab, I'm going to step in, then I'm going to grab them and do the same kind of takedown. So there's a lot of different ways to look at certain techniques, and this is why I like to draw the line between self-defense and fighting for sport, because certain things only work in certain contexts, right? We have like all these, chin na techniques and grappling and things like that, that it's like, yes, if somebody punches like this, I'm going to grab, I'm going to twist, I'm going to pull in, I'm going to lock. It's like, they don't work like that, right? A drill like that might work if I'm chilling with the homies and someone grabs onto my shoulder that's being a pain in the ass, and I might be able to lock them up because they're not expecting it, because I'm defending myself from somebody that I perceive to be a threat. This isn't like a mutual, all right, you're in your gear, I'm in my gear, let's go. He punches, I'm gonna lock him up this way. Is there a chance that that can work? Sure. Is it likely? No, not very likely. The point being is we have to really think about the context of our material. Shaolin is big on self-defense, right? Because they were monks. So there's a lot of passive activity that comes with that. There's a lot of variation to how somebody like that would be accosted. Yeah. And sometimes it's a matter of explaining the timing too. Because like these kind of like arm locks and things, sometimes they don't work because you're too slow. And especially like the technique that I just explained, right? If someone grabs me and I can immediately do this, it'll probably work. If somebody grabs me and they squeeze and they're bigger and stronger than me, I'm just going to end up hitting like a brick wall, I'm not going to be able to get them off of me. So learning how to time it, learning when and when not to use something is super important. So I would try it, right? Because even back in with my first teacher, it didn't matter if you were a 5 foot tall, skin and bones, or you were 6'7" and muscle mass. If you guys were partnered up and that big person grabbed the smaller person, they were magically able to use these techniques because naturally the taller person held back. Because we're training, right? We're learning concepts. But in my eyes, that smaller person is not learning how to handle somebody that's bigger than them. They're learning these techniques, which is beautiful, right? They should learn some of these techniques because you're not always going to be accosted by somebody that's bigger than you. Your sparring partners are not always going to be bigger than you. Maybe they're shorter than you. Maybe they're your size, So yes, that part is great. But we never really looked into body size and weight. How can a smaller person beat a bigger person, right? And when I mean bigger, it could mean anything. It could mean more muscle mass, more fat, more height. How does that work, right? So we have to look at our techniques and be realistic. So a technique like this is not something somebody smaller would use against somebody larger. And this is what I mean when I say we have to gear our practice to fit our own unique circumstances, right? I'm 6 feet tall, about 200 pounds, somewhere between 200 and I don't know. My weight changes a lot, so I could be between 185 and 220. So when I'm teaching somebody, right, and they're shorter than me, like, how would you use this technique? I'm like, well, here's how I would use it, but you have to keep in mind I'm 6 feet tall. You have to keep in mind I'm 200 pounds. You have to keep in mind that against somebody like you who is shorter, skinnier, lighter than me, I can do this no problem. Now you try. And they can't, right? So what's the alternative? There's so many different alternatives. You don't have to do any of this chin knot crap. Like, you can just deck somebody in the nuts. I mean, I know how that sounds. In sport, sure, that's not fair because it's a mutual decision to fight. But when it comes to self-defense and somebody grabs you, a swift kick to the balls, and a follow-up, maybe a knee to the face, that works on anybody. And you really have to think about, what am I training for? Because the drills that I'm showing you, to be very real with you, they might work in sport. But if somebody comes up to you and it's like, hey, do you have the time? Like, you gotta be faster. A technique like this, no, like you gotta be able to do something quick. And I'm back at it again. Maybe I have an obsession, but if I can shift back from somebody asking, hey, do you have the time, with a swift hook, if I can move back from that hook and kick them in the dick, like, I'm at the advantage here. And the reason I'm honing in on this is because we have to condition our brains to respond effectively, right? So if my brain is so hell-bent on learning, yes, I must use these techniques, I'm not thinking simple enough. When it comes to self-defense, we need to pick and choose what techniques we're going to master, what techniques we're going to focus on, and we need to be realistic with ourselves. I don't care how much you train iron palm. I don't care how much you train iron fist. I don't care how much you train iron dick. If you're not ready, or you're not capable of responding in a second, all that is useless, right? Because it's not a, hey, I'm robbing you, charge up your chi. And I don't really believe in any of that stuff. But, you don't have the time to think. You don't have the time to concentrate and focus your energy into busting somebody's chest open with your iron magic. So, what can you do, right? Build fast response times. Build a solid foundation, right? Have a fast punch. Have a good flicker jab. However you want to do it. A fast back fist. Because you need something to respond instantly, and then you can use your stuff, right? So if somebody comes up and starts, right, something fast like that might come out. Something useless, something that's not, well, okay, I'm not going to say useless, but something that's not going to put somebody down. But it's going to give me that second that I need to respond. And maybe it's this followed by, one of these movements. Maybe it's this followed by a graph punch. You never know. But I need to condition myself to respond quick and effectively. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope that you all learned something, and we're going to spend the month looking at Northern Shaolin, particularly the open hand stuff. But for now, I really want to hone in and focus on Northern Shaolin and take a look at some core concepts and movements and strategy that they used. That is part of the reason why the system is still alive today. And I know Kung Fu gets crapped on all the time, which I totally understand. But these systems have survived for a reason, and I have to believe it's because they do have a lot of functionality, because they do have good techniques, because they're great exercises for so many things, and a lot of that just feels so lost in translation or in secrecy. And I want to throw all that secrecy crap out the window because it serves no function. All that secret stuff is going to do is get people to believe in this mystical Kung Fu element. And I don't care about that. I think Kung Fu needs to be practical and relevant if it's going to survive. Y'all take care. I'll see y'all on the next one. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, drop them below. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, show some love. Appreciate you all.